Perfect. And the dictation. All right, so we are in our final section, and this section is on dating.
On which?
Sorry?
On what?
Dating.
Dating, dating?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what's that? Okay.
Um, well, we'll introduce it. Cultural historians have argued that the introduction of the birth control pill, legalization of abortion, and dissemination of the free love ideology changed gender relations and dating in the early 70s. So my first question is, do you agree with that statement? Oh yeah. Do you agree with that statement?
In retrospect, I agree with it. I was married at the time I went to law school, believe it or not. I mean, it was a very young marriage, and my wife took birth control pills. So her parents did not agree with that. Her father was a minister, and there was a kind of a conflict about that. So that generation was in conflict, I think, of the parents' generation, especially if they had these religious tenets. So that was a problem. And whether or not she really did, I don't know, because in second year law school, my son was born. So I was a father during law school. And we were living in another city, and I had to come back and forth on weekends. And so it also, in my recollection, when you ask these questions, it opened up a kind of a promiscuousness among relationships, which I don't think was healthy. Abortion is not something that I, except for, like a rape or health of the mother, that kind of stuff. Like just to know you can, if the pill doesn't work, you can have an abortion. To me, is not spiritually consistent with anybody. Everybody, follows their own rules. But that was there. So I think it increased promiscuity in a very unhealthy way. And I think that did permeate the university students at that age group at that time, not for the good. So it created a lot of problems, which we probably still live with today. But now people have to find another type of community to avoid all that stuff. So I think it was a kind of an excitement about breaking the old rules and having freedom to do what you want to do. And like in that famous movie when the adult daughter was doing this and doing that, what was the name of that movie? And she said, "You're free." The father said, "Yeah, you're free to do this, you're free to do that, all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll." And then he says, "And you're free to go to hell." So I think that movie kind of set the tone of the generational conflict. The name of that movie escapes me right now, but it was right on point with your question.
Right. What did dating look like at UOttawa in the 70s? What was the procedure?
Well, I was only an observer because, I mean, I never, had anything pre-marriage. I was not involved with things, so I'm not kind of the right person to ask about that.
Okay.
So, but I saw it going on quite a bit. And then, 1 month somebody's dating somebody, then they're dating somebody else. It was like, what was the right word? It was like a social orgy, It, there didn't seem to be the same set of guidelines that you hear about or learn about. So it kind of was almost beginning of a free-for-all, which I could not relate to, but a lot of people got involved with that. So I was more like an observer, and there was, I think there might have been a couple of times within that era of the law class and everything, and the articling, that I think I did get swept up with a couple of events that I'm not happy with. Nothing that was caused any danger, but it was against my principles. But it was like a group, it became like a group think. So I think a lot of people went along with stuff that they probably knew was not a good idea, but it seemed like that was what was happening, and you gotta connect. So I found that uncomfortable.
Right. How did your generation look at family and marriage?
Well, I think that was the beginning when most people were not looking at family and marriage. I don't think that was on me. So it was kind of, there were people in our class that were more mature students that already were married and even had their kids. But by and large, the furthest thing that I thought was on anyone's mind was family and marriage. It was like, this is the generation, everyone's going to carve out their own niche. They're going to be a professional, going to have a career. The priorities were not like the old days, especially even though there was only a few women, there was still, and that grew over the years, actually, even while in law school, and the next year and the next year before we left, there was more women every year coming in. But I think the priorities were more in terms of what can you do with your own life, and there's not a lot of talk about need to get married, and dating was sometimes people were committed to certain dating, but it was not necessarily the case. It was so I don't think that idea was a prevalent idea at the time. The idea of family and marriage and stuff, and it was really, you put yourself in a position. It's very expensive to go to university. Some of us got student loans. Unlike others in our class who had a lot of wealthy parents, I didn't get a cent from my father. It was really tough. I had to actually, at Carleton, had to quit for a year because there was no money. So it was really and I was the first person in my family to even go to a post-secondary school. I was the first one to go to university. I had to go to a professional school. So, you really focused. The focus was just getting in, getting by, getting graduated. So I don't think that for me, it was a little too late because I already had a son, and then we had a daughter. So now they have their own children, and it's wonderful. They're all doing well.
Awesome. Okay, we're on our final question. And this question is, to what extent did members of your parents' generation worry about this dating culture and premarital sex?
Well, my general reflective impression is that prior generation give up on the next generation. They didn't see any moral limitations or general principles of a certain culture being honored. In some cultures, it was imposed on women to behave a certain way or to do certain things. And those cultures still are around, but back then, I think I'm not sure if I'm answering your question as well as I should. I'm just trying to reflect. You want to repeat the question? Maybe something else will come to me.
Sure. To what extent did members of your parents' generation worry about this dating culture that you described and about premarital sex?
Okay, so what comes to me now that I've heard it again, they weren't worried about it. They gave up on us.
Okay.
It was just free for all, and I think it dismayed to have some of the previous generation to see that, but they figured that's the way the world is, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Okay. All right.
There was conflict between the generations and two, for sure. And some pretty serious consequences in some of them, some of the cultures, some of the women would be killed for deviating from the norm. And there was other consequences to other people. And so that there was a lot of negative side effects about that. But I think that what I said, I think it wasn't, they just gave up on the next generation. So yeah, it's just let it go.
Okay. Well, that was my last formal question. Do you have anything else to add before I stop the recording about your experience at the University of Ottawa while you were a student there?
Well, lately I was asked to give a presentation on gratitude. And it's a beautiful word. It's very biblical, but it's very spiritual, but it's also very practical. And I think we should all be grateful that we had a chance in this part of the world to have such an education, to have dedicated faculty and deans and administrators that want us to succeed and create a safe environment that we can do the best that we can in our life. So I think it's really important that all alumni express gratitude to all of those who made the university work at so many levels and still do to this day. Even the current crop of the dean I've met, the faculty, and to be the law schools are seen by many people as still not being up to date with complete adaptation to new ways of doing problem solving. I mean, the lawyers in the law profession are going to go the same as AI is going to take over a lot of stuff. But a lot of the teaching is one former chief judge of the Court of Appeal in Quebec, when I was on a panel, was in not long ago, 4 years ago. He said publicly, I give up on law schools. I mean, there's so many things happening on the ground in a practitioner's way that are not necessarily being taught in law schools and as they should be. And part of my quest for the last 2-3 decades, and even now, is to try to contribute to improving that. But gratitude is the one thing I think should be a prevalent theme by all alumni for the University of Ottawa. And that includes specifically for us, the Common Law Department.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop the transcription now and end the recording.